Get your pack of niggas. Mel Gibson is back with a new film, and he's decided to bring Marky Mark. Unfortunately, the Funky Bunch was left at home, but in their place, he brought Topher Grace and Michelle Dockery, who I think are just as funky, you know. But Marky Mark is Marky Mark, as you always loved him to be, right? You know what you love about Mark Wahlberg: Boston, rape. That's the greatest thing about Mark Wahlberg. He does a lot of that in this movie. Just a bunch of rapey innuendos and jokes. That's like his whole performance here. Now, Topher Grace, he's an informant for the FBI or some sort of CIA, some sort of government thing, in law enforcement. Did some work for mob boss Moretti or something like that. And they want to bring him in to answer some questions, so this way they can lock him up. But the thing is that being a crime boss as Moretti is, like most crime bosses, they don't really want to go to jail. Unfortunately, they kind of just want to do crime, but they don't want to do the time. So he sends Mark Wahlberg in the sky to kill him. You know, he puts on this Texas country bumpkin accent and
Deputy Harris, hope you like flying.
And tries really hard to disguise himself. But unfortunately, the type of character Mark Wahlberg is in this movie, the psychopathic, crazy man that he is, and you can't hide that psychopathy. You can try, but you know you're gonna leave blood on your sleeve. You're gonna leave a cut on your neck because you just love the game of killing and fighting. Also, Michelle Dockery is a detective. Her job is to detect things, to see things around her for evidence, to know what she's dealing with. And once she saw that blood on his sleeve, she was like, hey, I know you're not from Texas. And I know you don't have a head of hair on your head. You're a bald ass Boston bitch who's here to kill us. I would say out of all these three people here, I would say Mark Wahlberg is probably the best here. What Mark Wahlberg in his performance came down to was that he's like a veteran psychopath, just makes a bunch of rape jokes and murder jokes. I'm not sure. I'm not a veteran psychopath myself. I've never met one. So it could be pretty on pace or on up to par with a veteran psychopath, but I wouldn't know due to my lack of experience being one and being near them. It's fun for a while when no one's discovered him yet. These are the fun parts of Mark Wahlberg. After a while, it just becomes pedantic because it keeps doing the same thing over and over again. This movie is like on a loop. Let me show you how this movie goes. Right? They'll fly the plane for a little while. Michelle Dockery and Topher Grace will have a dialogue back and forth. Mark Wahlberg will then attack them. They will then incapacitate Mark Wahlberg, tie him up somewhere. And while Mark Wahlberg is tied up, he will just make a bunch of rape threats and murder threats to them. And then Michelle Dockery will be flirted with by a pilot that's helping her fly the plane due to the fact that, you know, Mark Wahlberg killed the pilot and he's the only one here who knows how to fly the plane. Topher Grace character, nor the Michelle Dockery's character knows how to fly a plane. So, you know, they have to figure out how to get out of the sky and not like crash land and everybody dies. And then they fight. And that's pretty much the movie in repeat until the movie ends. And this movie is an hour and 30 minutes. Luckily, it wasn't like an hour and 40 or like 2 hours long. Or I might have really hated this movie. I didn't hate it because it was so short and quick and to the point. It's very hard to hate because it's not long. It's just extremely boring. There are moments of times where you are entertained. Like I said, Mark Wahlberg is extremely entertaining when he's awake and making his rape jokes. And Topher Grace and Michelle Dockery's characters have the most boring dialogue with one another. It's just not very interesting when Mark Wahlberg is not interacting with anyone. The mole subplot in this movie doesn't really come to fruition. It kind of just dies off when it gets towards the end of this movie. They don't really resolve this whole thing with this FBI leak uh, or the person who's compromised their whole operation. They don't really have a resolve. Ultimately, this movie is just boring, man. I'm figuring out. I'm thinking of ways how I can properly talk about it, but it's just really nothing here to talk about. Everything that I've talked about is what the movie showed already. There's nothing deeper going on here. There's nothing you can really get from it. It's just a movie. It doesn't even really need to be in theaters. I'm gonna be honest with you. This is not a theater movie. This is a Netflix, Amazon Prime, Tubi movie. It's not a movie theater movie. The only reason it's in movie theaters, I think, is because of Mel Gibson and Mark Wahlberg. Also, because I think it's the secret um, Predator movie. Because I remember the guy who made what's that movie, Prey, said that they was gonna have like 3 Predator movies out this year. Like 2 Predator movies that was going to be like a sequel to Prey and something like that, and then one secret Predator movie that nobody knew about. This is that secret Predator movie because Topher Grace's character Winston is, I'm 99.9% sure, is the character from Predators, Edwin. They look the same, they talk the same, they dress the same. They both have Win in their names. They have the same backstory. Both being an accountant and working with a crime boss. So this is just that. This is just a movie. This is technically a Predator movie. This is a movie within the Predator universe. In case you didn't know, now you know. But that's like the only interesting thing about it. Nothing about which they don't really talk about in this movie. Ultimately, if I was to rate this movie, I would give this movie probably about a 3 out of 10. Very boring. Should not have been in theaters. I don't care that you're Mel Gibson and Mark Wahlberg. Take your asses to Netflix like everybody else.